Hello and welcome back to Ticker Symbol Live, your daily look at ARK Invest's biggest buys and sells as we try to map their 5-year vision of the future into the stock market today. Of course, this week ARKX has been announced and is dropping. I think it starts actually trading today, so we're going to start looking at more and more stocks that are in ARKX, starting of course with its biggest position, Trimble. ARKX is ARK Invest's fund themed around space exploration, and the stocks in it have surprised a lot of people, so I kind of want to shed some light on what is going on in this crazy new fund. So let's head over to the ARK Reactor and see what we can pull up. Here we go. So I have the ARK Reactor as usual. Today it's sorted by percent number of shares. You can see some big increases at the top. These are of course changes made to ARKX between yesterday and today. I only have 2 days worth of data for ARKX, which is why you're seeing the Cathie indicator is missing some dates here. That's because ARKX is only 2 days old. It starts trading today. They put the data in yesterday and made some changes since. So that's what's going on here. ARKX is a massively tiny fund. I don't know why I used the word massively followed by tiny, but we're rolling with it. As you can see, if you go all the way down here, all of ARK Invest's combined positions, all of these stocks here that you can't see bars for even, are ARKX stocks. ARKX is so small, it represents about 0% of ARK Invest's total assets under management at a paltry $4 million. This is a tiny fund. So what we have to do is we actually have to look under the hood of the ARK Reactor. I'll show you that. And we have to make a few changes. We need to show nothing but ARKX. And now we can finally see what the heck is in this thing. So what you have here on the left is the stocks that make up the fund. Hopefully this is big enough. If not, I can try to make it bigger here. So Trimble Print, the ARK ETF, the ARK Index Fund for 3D printing, Kratos, and then down and down the list. LHX, JD, I think this is Komatsu, Lockheed Martin, and Iridium, rounding up some of their biggest positions here. So hopefully this gives you a bigger glance. I will figure out how to zoom in on this thing. I wasn't really prepared to do that because I didn't realize how small this fund was. So Trimble, making up the biggest position, it has $300,000 in it, and it makes up almost 9% of the fund. It is ARK's overall 65th biggest position, so one of the only positions in ARKX to even register on the regular bar chart, right? So if we go back here and we go back to the, whoa, what is happening? ARKX. This is wonky. Okay, well, Trimble is one of the only biggest positions. Trimble is the biggest position in ARKX, and it's one of the only positions that ARK has a lot of actual dollars in. So let me get out of the ARK Reactor. It doesn't really like small funds. It's meant to handle billions of dollars worth of assets, right? So we're going to switch to talking about Trimble specifically. Stop that. Share screen. Trimble stock. Share. So I was taking a look at Trimble all day today, and here's what I found. Trimble is a really cool company. So first of all, let's talk about the stock for a second. If you go to the 5-year view, this is what it looks like. Trimble has been around for a very long time. This is not a new company. It has a lot of interesting history that we're going to talk about real quick. Everyone who recognizes what's going on with Trimble and that it's in the top of a new ARK fund, that's what's responsible for its pre-market activity here. So kind of on a little bit of a rally before ARKX opens up later because they're expecting lots of volume in terms of purchases on Trimble. So pretty interesting. Let's talk about the actual company. So what I did was I took a look at their investor deck and I tried to piece together what this company actually does, because it turns out it does a lot of things in a lot of different spaces. Classic ARK fund stock in the sense that it has multiple industries. You know, it definitely has a disruptive innovation platform that crosses multiple industries, multiple market sectors, as you can see here. Everything from heavy duty to construction to agriculture, The list goes on and on. So how does that work? Well, here's what Trimble actually does. We'll skip this slide for a second and we'll get down here. So what Trimble does is they connect the very physical businesses to their digital twin, right? So what they do is they find a way to digitize every aspect of a business so that you can get the data you need to optimize your expensive processes. So let's break that down in a couple examples here. In construction, what you can do is finely model whatever you're building and then look at the model for faults, inaccuracies, weak spots, structural weak spots, and so on. So instead of having to go out and inspect a physical bridge every time, you can now make meaningful calculations and inspections of the model. And that drives feedback loops because now you can verify your construction against the ideal model, and you can make, the actual thing you're building better by working on the model, refining the model by updating that according to what you're actually building. And you're forming this positive feedback loop between a physical thing and its digital counterpart. That's the point here. In another example, you can 3D model an entire construction area. And then if you enable GPS on all of your construction assets, you can watch where they are in the model. So you can keep track of what's going on a construction site using a digital model instead of surveying the physical construction site over and over again. You know what I mean? Hey, where are my tractors? What are they doing? Where are my backhoes? What are they doing? Right? I'm looking at a computer instead of out my window and trying to survey it with my eyes. And I'm getting finely accurate position data. And as we'll see soon, other forms of data that combine in meaningful ways to let you look at the digital twin of a physical thing, right? So in agriculture, what this could look like is keeping up to date real-time field conditions, right? And what that lets you do is optimize your farm management plan. So think about these large, multi-dozen acre farms, 100-acre farms, 1,000-acre farms. How are you going to be able to manage things from the ground level? You need an aerial view. You need to update accordingly. You need to be looking at a computer screen that's keeping track of, the volumes of your crops, everything that's going on, rain sensing, understanding how wet each part of your area is when there's a lot going on physically, right? So what that lets you do is they instrument up all of the different things of the farm and they bring those digital feeds to a central location where now you can understand the status of your farm from a single point, right? And then you can do that on a larger scale where if you start digitizing individual trucks, individual railways, individual roadways, and so on, now trucks are passing sensors, they're passing checkpoints, they're passing waypoints, they're doing inspections on the fly, with certain sensors in the road or on tracks that are looking for ball bearing failures or listening for brake failures or, things like that. But you're getting that all digitally. So now you can optimize your logistics network using a combination of sensing and sensors, right? So sensors like on the ground and sensors in the actual trucks that work in combination to provide real-time updates over these large areas, in some cases as large as the entire nation. You can imagine doing this all over the road and railway network, and now you have a bird's eye view of what's going on over all of your assets, regardless of where they are, right? And so the big thing enabling this, of course, is GPS. And this is something that we're going to see over and over in ARKX. ARKX's technologies really leverage global positioning, which of course is a service provided by satellites in space using signals, the differences between timing and signals between the satellites to finally pinpoint where you are on the Earth. They're triangulating your position. And in this case, they're layering on top of that, different modeling software, different other forms of sensing. So, airborne cameras, airborne LiDARs and radars to form the maps, right? And then they're digitally setting them in the right spot on the Earth with GPS, right? Using GPS waypoints, surveying techniques, and all that. So that's what Trimble does at a bird's eye view, no pun intended. That's what's going on here, right? And so they break their industries into 4 key parts. Geospatial, that's what we just talked about, and they're really empowering construction, agriculture, and transportation, the examples I just gave you. Another really interesting fact, if you remember, Google owned a service called Sketchup in 2012. It was kind of like a mix of SolidWorks and CAD. It let you build like your own little 3D models or your own little like architectural 3D blueprints of buildings. Like people loved, making models of all their furniture and of all of their, things inside their condo and having a digital version of their house or condo or whatever. Well, it turns out that Trimble owns SketchUp. So like if you might have like, oh, Trimble, why does that sound familiar? It's because SketchUp is owned by Trimble. So if you've ever used this free software, which I encourage you to do, it's actually really cool. Trimble owns that. And again, this is that same idea of digitizing something physical so that you can use software and other integrations and all that kind of stuff instead of having to interact with the actual physical thing here, right? So very clear example of like what people are using SketchUp for, like I just said, in architecture or in design, for buildings and stuff. It's really interesting. But the whole point is to digitize something physical to make use of its digital twin, right? So let me take a look at the comments here. Lots of interesting stuff going on. I'm late, no notification from YouTube. That's fine. What's the price of ARKX? I believe it'll be $20 because that's what their other funds open at. So let's keep going here, right? So lots of interesting things you can do when you start digitizing something very physical, right? Trimble, so the other thing I did was I took a look at all the different sectors to start forming a story in my head of how they're applying their solution, this idea of forming a digital twin, to the different markets that they operate in, right? So the industries they serve: agriculture, construction, geospatial, and transportation. Geospatial, again, is things like surveying, building maps, updating locations of things and so on. So let's get right into it. So capturing the digital twin of your network for utilities, what that looks like is digital mapping and data collection, asset management, so knowing where all of your transformers are, all of your wires are, how your network breaks up into subnetworks and so on, providing mobile solutions for the actual implementers out there. So where am I? What node in the network am I about to be touching? What am I doing to it? What are its statuses and faults? What diagnostics do I need to know going into this? Now I don't need to ask a human being or even the customer. Now I have the status of my network because I've digitized every piece of it, right? When you do that, you can do things like investment planning. Hey, how many faults do I have all over my network? How much do each of those faults cost? What are the solutions to those faults? What's the downtime incurred with those faults? So on and so forth. From that, you can do planning and design, right? So this is what my network actually looks like, right? Here's how many nodes it has. Here's how many transformers I have on how many poles in how many towns and how many states, right? Distribution and outage management. Hey, where I have a failure, what does that mean? Who is that actually affecting and so on? Transmission rating, so knowing how much electricity I'm actually pumping through a given line, right? Vegetation management. What's the biggest problem with managing these lines? It is, of course, all of the trees that form around them, right? And then augmented reality, looking at, hey, here's what we were planning to build where. Let me look through my cell phone and see, does this look right given where I plan to build it? And again, that's being enabled by GPS, finally positioning that asset in a digital space so people can go to the physical location and see in digital space, augmented reality, what is going on there, right? And then, of course, analytics. So what Trimble is doing is taking this very physical legacy infrastructure thing, in this case, electrical utilities, and because they're digitizing every step and providing you that digital twin, you can make all these meaningful high-level decisions because you understand your whole network that you couldn't do by just going out and trying to assess every piece with your eyes, right? So that idea of the digital twin is the one-liner for what Trimble does, right? So that's Trimble and utilities, so utility networks and utilities, lots of the same things we're going to see here: digital mapping, asset management, mobile solutions, operations management. So now understanding like, who do I have to deploy where, what field work, what's wrong, when do I need to dig stuff up? Is it a fault under the ground or is it a fault on a line that's, hung from pole to pole? Investment planning, augmented reality, analytics, and performance. So making the most out of the network you've already built by utilizing its digital twin. In transportation, they can do the same thing. Now imagine the problem is I have a fleet of trucks or construction vehicles or drones or whatever, and I'm trying to optimize my management of those assets, right? So what they do is they think about day-to-day performance on the road and in the office, integrated data that supports every team member. Again, that's that digital twin, and picture views into available resources. So that's like not just providing you tables and statuses, but like an integrated map that really gives you the whole picture, right? So we can skip down and we can talk about how they support fleet mobility, right? Which is, again, telematics. So different little sensors that go on parts of the fleet to bring back data to the control center or the home base or whatever, so that people in management positions can make meaningful decisions. They do that through hardware, through software, and through bundled packages, right? So these are just different telematics solutions, and different resources. I thought there was a little more information on that. Sorry. Track your fleet anywhere. Again, fleet management, talking about GPS-enabled fleets, trucks, construction vehicles, drones, and then being able to plan your resources to keep everything compliant. 1, 2, safe, obviously. That's probably number 1, actually. But 3, maximizing utilization, right? So optimizing your routes and optimizing uptime is a big deal. Imagine you just have a fleet of robo-taxis, right? What do you want to do? You want to put a sensor, you want to put a few sensors on every robo-taxi. What are those sensors going to be? You want to know where they are. You want to know the basics of the health and status of every robo-taxi. You want to know which ones are filled or empty, right? And you want to know what routes you're planning to drive them all on to optimally pick up people, right? So that's the kind of stuff that Trimble enables. Here are the physical sensors that need to go on these robo-taxis if they don't already exist or are not integrated in them. That's one of the things Tesla does very well, is think about the sensors they'll need 10 years from now and put them in cars today so they can turn them on with over-the-air updates. But say you're not doing that. So Trimble will put those sensors in and give you the infrastructure to read the results of those sensors in your home base so that you can start managing and updating your schedule in real time as things change. Oh, taxi 121 got a flat tire. Taxi 230 hasn't picked up somebody in 2 hours. What's going on? Taxi 323 had to change its route, and now it's covering the same rounds as Taxi 101. How do we unjam them by replanning them in real time? Those kind of situations amount to real dollars spent and saved to optimize the routes of your taxi, right? And optimize the efficiency of how many people you're picking up and moving per hour, and how many taxis you may have in maintenance at any one given time, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what Trimble is doing. How Trimble is different than Palantir is Trimble is doing the hardware side of that too. Trimble is doing the physical sensors and the physical surveying, the physical mapping. Trimble kind of does both sides. Palantir, my understanding is they're very heavy on the software, the big data, right? They're providing the analytics for you, but they're not providing the actual hardware packages that make up those analytics. So, absolutely agree with this. Very applicable, huge market. But the thing I want to focus on, the reason this is in ARKX is because they are using Geospatial Technology. They're using GPS as a primary way, a primary tool to enable this kind of stuff. In all of these cases, what they're doing is they're finely tuning the position of everything in that digital twin so that you know not only the status of all my stuff, but physically where it is, right? As things change in construction sites, volumes get adjusted, things get remapped. You don't just know what everything on that construction site is, you know exactly where everything is in your construction site. For large logistics networks, trains, fleets of trucks, right, semis and stuff, this matters a lot. Where everything is, the amount of ground you're covering, where all your inventory is physically matters a lot. And that's what Trimble is doing, right? So at first I was scratching my head like, hey, why is this in ARKX? This is a fundamentally terrestrial company, right? Everything we're talking about back here, right? Agriculture, transportation, this stuff happens on Earth, right? Like, why is this in the space fund? The answer is because you're using space-based technology to do it, and that's going to be integral to how we do it on other planets. You're going to have to do it that way as well. So supply chain, we kind of talked about that a little bit. Mobility, fleet, telematics, I just gave you the taxi example on that. Supply chain visibility, I just gave you the semis example on that. And then video intelligence, so being able to incorporate video data and say, I know where that camera is, so I know where what I'm looking at is, right? So protecting your fleet, and also for security, right? Protecting your fleet, training your drivers, right? Real-time video examples. So, and then the last piece is construction. The whole chain of construction from architecture to owner can be enabled by the digital twin. And we kind of saw that in SketchUp a little bit. You can imagine as you're building out an entire house from the ground up, everyone's looking at this same SketchUp idea, and everyone agrees on what they're talking about when they're designing a new house or a new office or a new commercial building, new construction site, what have you. Now, because we have that digital twin first, we can empower everyone, every stakeholder in this big project to be on the exact same page when the first shovel cracks the first piece of ground, right? So that's really important too. Of course, Trimble isn't the only company doing that, but because they can integrate that into everything else they do, they can make use of that digital twin literally everywhere across that whole value chain from owner to architect, right? So for construction sites, I thought this was pretty cool. CSpot Fetch, they have a strategic alliance with Boston Dynamics, that robotics company that makes like all those sweet robots that can do backflips. So a robotic dog that goes around and surveys like the actual field site and helps like update that model in real time, right? Optimizing operations by digitizing everything that's going on, 3D data in real time in the real world, so allowing the workers to interact with the data to make meaningful decisions in the physical space, building tomorrow's workforce, so training, different types of skilled laborers today to get more used to working with data in their environment tomorrow, right? Think about, the average truck driver. The average truck driver's great at driving, right? And there's a lot of skills that have to come with that, but big data analytics probably isn't one of them just by the idea of the job. So being able to move from this, hey, I'm a driver, to hey, I'm a manager of a physical and digital asset is really important. And so Trimble is supplying training as part of that to say, hey, you're getting all these data from all this data, from all these different sensors, but also you're part of this larger logistics network. And so why we might move you and reroute you down these seemingly janky pathways for your truck makes sense if you take a global view of the whole network and you understand we're trying to route you in a way that minimizes the disturbance to the overall network, right? So moving the actual skilled laborers, construction workers, truck drivers, etc., into this like idea of having a digital twin as an asset they can use to look at the physical thing they're working on is going to require some training, and that's what Trimble is talking about here, right? So, and then the whole process, again, like we just saw with the SketchUp example, being able to talk about the whole process in the digital space before making any physical changes to something, because now you have that digital twin first, right? And so, they have, what this really means is they have on-machine sensors, right, for single machines, for flexible machine types. So you can imagine like, single sensors specifically for backhoes, right? I want to know exactly what position this piece of this specialized tool is in at all times. What is the status of, the arm on this construction equipment? Flexible machine types, so things like GPS pucks, where it's, hey, I just care where this machine is, not necessarily what it is, so that can go on multiple machines. Specified machine kits, so here's everything you need for your backhoe. In-cab kits, so like, with all that data comes the necessity to be able to look at all that data. So here's a tablet and software specifically so you can see the digital status of your physical machine. Separate off-machine machines. So I know that sounds kind of funny, but think about that robotic dog, right? So supplying you something that does the surveying, and it already has all the sensors and parts it needs to do that. Software, right? So now I'm the fleet manager sitting in an office. I need software that can look at all this data, right? And then all the support and training that comes with that. So that's what Trimble offers its customers to do all the things we just talked about Trimble doing, right? So hopefully that gives you some idea of what Trimble does, why it's in ARKX, why it's the biggest holding in ARKX, how it does what it does with some software, and so on. So I'll take a few questions, and then I obviously have some updates I'm going to make to the ARK reactor on the back end. And the last thing I'll say, if you're a Patreon supporter, there's a reason. So what you just saw with the ARK reactor is why this is not in the state of the art yet. So if you're somebody who subscribes and is using my dashboards to do your own, buy and sells and all that kind of stuff on the back end, your own research for ARK Invest, you'll notice that ARKX is still not in the state of the art. Not an accident. The reason I didn't do that is because it's so much smaller than the other funds. It changes these plots in different ways. Not sure why this isn't updating. I haven't touched it. So I'm keeping ARKX off of this for 1 week while trading, buying, and selling starts to happen. And then I will you will see a 6th fund here, and you can dig into ARKX specifically. So just letting you know, that's what's going on the back end. That's why we're still looking at 5 funds, even though a 6th started trading today. Great. Let's answer a few questions. Trimble has an expected growth of 7% year over year, but Cathie says she only invests in 15% to 20% growth stocks. How do you see this? I think we're talking about 2 different growths. I think what you're seeing is the growth of Trimble as a business, 7% year over year. And what Cathie is saying is the stock itself, the stock price, is misvalued compared to where she thinks it should be. So she thinks in 5 years, the stock price will double because Trimble's business is not being valued correctly by the market. So 7% year over year growth does not translate to a 7% stock price increase, right? Lots of different things move the market. Lots of different things move a company, right? A company's valuation. Those 2 things are not the same always, right? So that's what's going on there. The difference between the stock and the company. A few other questions here. Does this Trimble networking sound a little Borg-like to you? That's pretty funny. I think digitizing physical assets, especially legacy physical assets, so think utility, old automobiles, train networks, construction, very physical machines with limited digital footprints is a big, big idea. Why do I say that? Because nobody wants to go and rebuy those things. Nobody wants to go and rebuy a whole new train, right? What do you want to do? You want to retrofit and upgrade your existing trains with the sensors you need to do the job you want to do in the digital era, right? To do that, you're going to utilize things like Trimble. You're going to utilize services, sensors, software, and consultancies like Trimble to make your yesterday built train work like a train built today. So that's Trimble in a nutshell. That's the biggest holding in ARKX right before it starts trading in about 30 minutes. My expectation is that ARKX will start at $20 and then adjust accordingly with the ups and downs of the weighted funds inside of it, including, funnily enough, ARK Invest's 3D printing ETF, PRNT, which is the number 2 position in ARKX, ARK Invest fund themed around space exploration. I'm super excited for it. I'm sure we're going to be talking about the stocks inside this fund for a few days, probably all week, just because it's, a new fund for ARK. So we're going to see how things change in the first few days of this new fund, and we'll go from there. So thanks for watching. This is Ticker Symbol Live. My name is Alex, reminding you that the best investment you can make is in you.